I've been driving long haul for over 20 years, and I've seen some weird things out on the road. You spend enough time in the dead of night with nothing but your headlights cutting through the darkness, and eventually, something is bound to see you back. Most of the time, it's just exhaustion messing with your head. But sometimes, it's something else, something real. I've had my fair share of disturbing encounters, and there are 8 that I'll never forget. The Man in the Fog. It was a rainy night on Route 50 through Nevada, known as the loneliest road in America. I was miles from the nearest town when a thick, unnatural fog rolled in. My high beams barely cut through it. The air felt thick, like the mist had weight, pressing in around my truck. Even with the wipers on full blast, visibility was near zero. Then, out of nowhere, a figure appeared in the middle of the road. I slammed the brakes so hard my rig nearly jackknifed. My heart pounded as I gripped the wheel, staring at the man through the blur of rain. His clothes were tattered and soaked, clinging to his body. His face was pale, eyes sunken deep into his skull, like he hadn't slept or eaten in years. I honked, expecting him to move. He didn't. He just stood there, staring at me with dead, unblinking eyes. Something in my gut screamed, "Don't get out." My fingers hovered over the door handle, but a primal fear kept me frozen in my seat. Instead, I flicked on my high beams. That's when I saw it. His feet weren't touching the ground. He hovered an inch above the wet asphalt, motionless, the rain passing straight through him. The instant my lights hit him full force, his lips curled into a slow, unnatural grin. Then he vanished. Just gone, like he was never there. The fog lifted within seconds, like whatever had been controlling it decided to release me. I punched the gas, tearing down that road without looking back. To this day, I refuse to drive Route 50 at night. Something's out there. I don't want to see it again. The hitchhiker who wasn't there. I was somewhere on Interstate 10, deep in the Texas desert, when I saw her. She stood by the side of the road, barely illuminated by the pale glow of my headlights. Long, dark hair clung to her face, and she wore an old, faded dress that looked like it belonged in another decade. She raised one hand, thumb extended, silently asking for a ride. Now, I don't usually pick up hitchhikers, but something about her, maybe the way she stood, completely still in the middle of nowhere, made my skin crawl. But I stopped. She climbed in without a word. For miles, she just sat there, staring straight ahead. Her silence was suffocating. I tried making conversation, but she wouldn't answer. Just sat there, hands folded in her lap. Then I noticed her fingers. Too long, too many joints. My stomach twisted into a knot. My grip on the wheel tightened. My mouth went dry. I stole a glance at my rearview mirror, needing to reassure myself that I was just imagining things. But the seat was empty. I slammed the brakes, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The truck lurched to a stop, and I whipped around, expecting, hoping, to see her still sitting there. She was gone. The door hadn't opened. The seatbelt was still fastened. No footprints on the dusty floor mat. Nothing. I didn't stop again that night. I just drove until I saw the first sign of sunrise. The laughing man in my sleeper cab. It was a routine stop at a rest area in Kentucky. One of those empty, dimly lit truck stops where the only company is a few parked rigs and the buzzing of a flickering street light. I was exhausted, so I locked up, crawled into my sleeper, and passed out. Sometime in the night, I woke up to laughter. It was low and raspy, like a smoker's chuckle, and it was coming from inside my truck. The sound slithered through the darkness, curling around me in the pitch-black cab. Every hair on my body stood on end. My fingers trembled as I reached for the flashlight I kept by my bunk. I yanked back the curtain separating my cab from the sleeper, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Nothing. The cab was empty. Then, right next to my ear, I heard it again. A deep, guttural chuckle, inches away. I bolted. I tore out of that truck faster than I ever have in my life, slamming the door behind me. My breath came in ragged gasps as I stood in the cold night air, my hands shaking. Silence. I waited for dawn. When the sun finally crept over the horizon, I cautiously climbed back into my truck. The inside reeked of rotting meat. And there, on the floor of my cab, were wet footprints. The truck that followed me. This one happened in Arizona, along a dark stretch of highway with nothing but desert and stars for miles. I'd been driving for hours when I noticed headlights in my mirror. Another truck, its massive grille looming close behind me. Too close. I radioed out over the CB. "Hey driver, you need to pass?" No response. I sped up. The truck behind me matched my speed. I slowed down. So did he. Something was wrong. The tension in my chest tightened like a vice. The only sound was my own engine, humming steady as I gritted my teeth. I kept glancing at my mirror, watching those headlights, unblinking, unwavering. Then, I saw something else. Through my side mirror, in the dim glow of his headlights, I saw the cab was empty. No driver, no movement, nothing. I nearly swerved off the road. My breath came in shallow gulps as I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white. I needed to get away. I spotted an upcoming rest stop and took the exit, pulling in fast and skidding to a stop. I watched the highway, waiting. The truck never passed. I stepped out, scanning the road. No headlights, no taillights, no dust trail. But in the stillness of the desert night, I heard it. A low, distant rumble. An engine that wasn't there. The thing in the rest stop bathroom, New Mexico, middle of nowhere. I pulled into a tiny, near-deserted rest stop around 3 a.m. to stretch my legs. The place was old, run down, almost forgotten, with a single flickering streetlight and a cinder-block bathroom building covered in faded graffiti. I stepped inside. The air smelled damp, metallic, wrong. Something about it made my skin crawl, but I pushed on. I walked past the stalls toward the urinals, and that's when I heard it. A voice, software, whimpering. It came from the last stall, the door slightly ajar. "Help me." A woman's voice, weak and trembling. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I forced myself to step closer. The stall door creaked open a little more, revealing only darkness inside. Then, the whisper turned into laughter, deep, guttural, inhuman. The door slammed shut on its own. I ran. Didn't stop until I was back in my rig with the doors locked. As I drove away, I glanced in my mirror at the bathroom one last time. A figure stood outside the doorway, staring at me. I don't stop at roadside bathrooms anymore. The Black-Eyed Child at the way station, West Virginia. I pulled into a way station just before dawn. The place was quiet, the kind of eerie quiet that makes you aware of every breath you take. I finished my log, then leaned back for a quick break. That's when I saw him. A small boy, maybe 6 or 7, standing outside my truck. He wore a filthy hoodie, his face pale under the yellow glow of the station lights. I rolled down my window just a crack. "Hey, kid, you lost?" He tilted his head, too far, unnatural. Then he stepped closer. That's when I saw his eyes. Black, solid black, no whites, no pupils. My blood turned ice cold. "Let me in." His voice was monotone, emotionless. I locked my doors and started my engine. The second the truck roared to life, the The boy's face twisted in anger. He slammed his tiny fists against my door. Bang, bang, bang. His strength unnatural. I floored it out of there. I've heard stories of black-eyed kids before, but I never believed them. Now, I pray I never see one again. The woman in the rearview mirror. Late one night in Missouri, I was driving along a deserted highway when I caught movement in my rearview mirror. A woman was sitting in my back seat. I nearly veered off the road. She was pale, soaked in water, her long hair dripping down over her face. Her dress looked old, like something from the early 1900s, and her eyes, empty, hollow sockets. I gripped the wheel, breathing hard. This isn't real. This isn't real. Then, slowly, she smiled. I blinked, and she was gone. I didn't stop until I reached the next truck stop, where I sat shaking for an hour before getting back on the road. The radio that spoke my name. This happened in the Appalachian Mountains. My CB radio was off, completely off. I was driving in dead silence when the static kicked in. A voice came through. Software. Faint. It whispered my name. The air in the cab turned ice cold. My breath fogged in front of me despite the heater blasting. The voice spoke again. Pull over. I didn't. The static grew louder, angrier, a screeching howl that filled my cab. My ears rang. My vision blurred. Then, it stopped. The air warmed instantly. My breath returned to normal. The radio was still off. I didn't sleep for 2 days after that one. I don't scare easy, but these moments haunt me. When you're a trucker, the road becomes your home. But some nights, something else is out there with you, watching, waiting, and sometimes calling your name.